Welcome to Trident Astrology. I'm Janine Kane. Today I'm going to be going over the November weekly forecast for the 9th through the 15th. I indexed this forecast in the description below with timestamps for each day. So if it's your preference, the index allows you to watch and navigate the sections in a day-to-day format. Also, I have this forecast in written form. If it's your preference to read it, there's a link to that in the description below as well. Okay, let's get started. So we begin this week with 5 planets in retrograde: Mars, Chiron, Uranus, Neptune, and Eris. Now Mars is going to be going direct on November 13th after a 2-month retrograde. Now our next outer planet ingression, which is of great significance, is when Jupiter and Saturn moves into Aquarius in December, and this is preparing us for the year ahead. Now this week we have Mercury entering into Scorpio on November 10th. Next week we have Sun entering into Sagittarius and Venus moving into Scorpio on the 21st. This week we have a new supermoon in Scorpio, which I'll be discussing later. Now this month we move into eclipse season with the eclipse occurring on November 30th, 2020. The next one will be December 14th. Now, this week is very important portal energy as it's preparing us for the year ahead. And the configurations involved in this are Mercury entering into Scorpio and Mars going direct. But of greater significance is the Jupiter-Pluto-Pallas Athena triple conjunction occurring on the 12th. And also on the November 14th, we have the Plutonic-infused new supermoon in Scorpio, forming a yaw to the Sun and Moon conjunction and a T-square between Eris, Venus, and the outer planets of Pluto, Jupiter, Pallas Athena, and Saturn. Okay, so let's go and dig into it, shall we? So on Monday, November 9th, Venus and Mars opposition goes exact at roughly 15 degrees of Libra and Aries. Now, oppositions have to do with integration of paradox and contradiction. Here, we're contending with the dual nature of animal instincts and impulses, which is the Aries, Mars and Aries, versus the discernment and value judgment, which is Venus and Libra. So in part, our collective evolution depends on our ability to incorporate mastery over our impulses, which, as we all have experienced, can be very challenging. Now, self-control, self-mastery, self-determination require an immense amount of discipline, which deals with Saturn, which exalts in Libra here. So we're dealing with the need for discipline here along this axis of Libra and Aries. Also, it would benefit our individual and collective evolution to integrate the dueling needs of self and other and apply the social utility of both the paradoxical inclinations of hierarchy versus holarchy, competition versus cooperation. Also on Monday, November 9th, Sun-Neptune trine goes exact at roughly 18 degrees. Let me pull that up. Now, the trine energy here between Neptune and Pisces and the Sun in Scorpio is an easy flow energy. But that doesn't necessarily mean positive outcomes are the norm. We still have to contend with the shadow side of the constellations involved in order to benefit from the trine aspect. Now, the Sun is about individual identity. It's in Scorpio, and this is about deep introspection, integration of unconscious material, and psychological transformation. Now, when we do the psychological work, we can sense a unity consciousness and heal our ego trauma. And this is very much associated with Neptune in Pisces. So when this happens, we gain empathy and compassion for ourselves and others. We transcend old behaviors and thoughts. And that's the potential positive outcome of this trine. Now, if we refuse introspection, we can become distrustful, paranoid, and destructive. That's the shadow side of Scorpio here. If this happens, we can become confused, lack center, and go into escapism behaviors, drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, whatever. And that's the shadow side of Neptune and Pisces. Sometimes we can use escapism to avoid introspection because it's painful. But we are in a time now that immensely requires our inner strength to do our individual psychological work. All right, moving on to Tuesday. On Tuesday, November 10th, Mercury enters into Scorpio, the threshold of the Libra-Scorpio conveyance. And this conveyance is within the post-retrograde shadow, roughly between 25 degrees of Libra and 12 degrees of Scorpio. And this is occurring between November 3rd through November 19th. Now, this conveyance has to do with our ability to confront disorder and unknown whilst attempting to maintain balanced perspective. Now, the evolutionary goal of this conveyance of Scorpio and Libra is to control our sympathetic responses to stress, learn to calm down, and regain mental equilibrium as we face the unknown and face stressors. Now, with Mercury shifting into Scorpio, we mentally shift into the evolutionary requirement of psychological examination and integration of unconscious material. All right, moving on to Wednesday. On Wednesday, November 11th, Venus, let me get that back up there, Venus and Neptune, Quincunx, is going to go exact roughly at 18 degrees of Libra and Pisces. Now, a quincunx energy is challenging because the constellations involved have nothing in common and cannot hear each other to communicate. So, extreme adjustments must be made in order to ameliorate the communication distortion. Here we have Neptune in Pisces, an endopsychic planet that wants dissolution, where there are no individual parts, everything is co-equal and whole. Now Libra here, Venus and Libra here, an ectopsychic planet is about relationships, which is fundamentally comprised through relationship between individual parts. So Neptune in Pisces desires the ideal. Neptune in Pisces desires the ideal, to go back to the original state of indivisibility. Now Venus in Libra desires the real, to contend with the individual differences and individual needs that sometimes causes conflict. So the evolutionary solution here is to learn to cooperate. Okie dokie. Now moving on to Thursday. Now it's a big whammy day. Here we have, on Thursday, November 12th, we have a remarkable triple conjunction between Pluto, Jupiter, and Pallas Athena at 22 degrees and 52 minutes of Capricorn. So let's just real quick look at these archetypes and psychological functions of the planets so we can understand what's happening here. Now, Capricorn represents social structure, social establishments, and collective purpose and responsibility. It symbolizes integrity, aligning symbiotically with our actions with our values. Now, Pluto represents transformation, regeneration, and the shadow side is destruction, distrust, and paranoia. Next, we have Jupiter. It represents faith, enthusiasm, and expansion. The shadow side of Jupiter is blind faith and naive utopianism. Pallas Athena represents courage and spiritual warriorship. The shadow side here is struggles and conflict. Now, on the positive possibility of the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction is expanding the transformation of our social structure. The integrity of our current social system is being scrutinized, and that's a good thing. On the negative side, we see distrust, paranoia, and destruction of the social structure. That's the shadow side of Pluto in Capricorn. We see blind faith and naive utopianism playing out in social cultural ideals, causing polarization. That's the shadow side of Jupiter in Capricorn. We see social struggles and conflicts, and that's the shadow side of Pallas Athena in Capricorn. Now, this is the third and last Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. The last two occurred on April 4th and June 30th. Now, during the Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions, we've seen surges of COVID-19 cases reported. We are at the start of another surge as we move into the winter season. So this Pluto-Jupiter conjunction is demarcating this trend. Now, with this triple conjunction, this energy is at a pinnacle phase, preempting the shift of Jupiter and Saturn into Aquarius in December. And Pallas Athena is bequeathing us her courage as advised by Zeus. That is the Jupiter conjunction with Athena here. This is infusing Pallas Athena's spiritual warrior energy into the collective and remaining ever beside us during this massive Aquarian shift. Okay, moving forward now on to Friday. On November 13th, Friday the 13th, Friday or Mars Day, because Friday is associated with Mars, Mars goes stationary direct at roughly 15 degrees of Aries. The 2-month period that Mars was retrograde was a time to review how you were using your vital energy. Now, Mars retrograde is about planning our work, and when it's direct, it's about working our plan. So during a Mars retrograde, the intense and fiery energy of Mars becomes intensified. So this is due to the proximity of Mars to Earth. It gets closer in proximity to Earth during the retrograde. So there's a tendency for more accidents, emotional aggressiveness, and slowed progress during a retrograde. So now that it's changing direction, moving away in proximity to Earth, whilst in the post-retrograde shadow from November 13th to January 2nd, we'll begin to slowly regain our vital energy. Notice injuries improving, particularly to the head, neck, and shoulder regions, and we will feel less confrontational. Now here's a really cool chart, just to show you really quick. So this chart is Mars distance to Earth as a function of time. Now, as we can see here, the time involved is from January 2020 to January 2021. So this is the full year. Now, as we can see, it's from the start of the year, Mars was moving in closer proximity to Earth. And on September 9th, 2020, it starts to even get close. It goes retrograde, and it starts to even get closer to the apex, which occurred, the apex of the Mars-Earth proximity, which occurred at the beginning of October, which was at 0.41 astronomical units away. And that's very, very close. And then eventually, after the apex, we start moving toward directness. On November 13th, Mars stationary directs, and we can see here that Mars proximity to Earth is slowly going to be moving farther away. And as that happens, the impacts of the retrograde is going to lessen. So I think this is a really cool way of seeing that. It really helps us understand what's going on there. Okay, moving on to Saturday, another big whammy day. We're having a lot of big whammy days really this week. Okay, so on Saturday, November 14th, we have a new super moon in Scorpio at 23 degrees. Now, a super moon is also known as a perigean moon, and that's when the moon is closest to the Earth. Um, so it just makes the new moon even more powerful and significant. Okay, so this new super moon is an extremely strong sextile to the triple conjunction that went exact on Thursday between Pluto, Jupiter, and Pallas Athena. Now, the Jupiter Pluto conjunction is expanding the transformation of our social structure and scrutinizing the fundamental integrity or the foundational integrity of our system, our social system. The benefit of this, the benefit to this is the maintenance of integrity and viability of our social system. On the negative side, distrust, paranoia, conflict, and destruction can result if aspects of the system are discovered detrimental or oppressive. And it seems like that we're kind of going into that direction right now. Now, with the Sun-Moon conjunction in Scorpio tied into this dynamic, this sextile of to the outer planets here, our collective growth depends on the individual doing his or her psychological work. That means deep introspection, integration of unconscious material, acquiring individual integrity, aligning our actions with our values, and healing unresolved emotional wounds. This is going to require a massive shift in consciousness and an immense emotional transcendence, because this means delaying gratification to do the work and shifting our perceptions to see varying viewpoints whilst maintaining the integrity of the whole system. So this challenge is represented by the yod here to the Sun and Moon conjunction, with the Eris in Aries, Quincunx, the Moon and Sun conjunction, and the North Node in Gemini, Quincunx, the Sun and Moon conjunction. Now, the Sun-Moon quincunx to the North Node represents the difficulty in seeing varying viewpoints or having critical discourse when we have distrust for opponents. That's the shadow side of the Scorpio here. Now, Eris in Aries, quincunx the Sun and Moon in Scorpio, are making psychological introspection and healing extremely challenging with all the extra stressors happening right now. So Eris represents discord and strife, which is right now forming a very powerful and strong T-square between Venus, outer planets of Jupiter, Pluto, Pallas, Athena, and Saturn. So let me pull this up. Here we go. As we can see here, we have a very strong T-square here between Eris and Aries opposing Venus and Libra, squaring the outer planets that recently were in or are in a powerful triple conjunction between Pluto, Jupiter, and Pallas Athena. So this is very significant T-square. Very significant T-square. Eris in Aries is causing collective discord and stress as it's squaring these outer planets in Capricorn, putting us in a survival mode, which gets in the way of both our ability to delay gratification and maintain faith. So it's Eris in Aries opposing Venus in Libra. That's the getting in the way of our ability to delay gratification. The Eris in Aries squaring Jupiter is what's getting in the way of us maintaining our faith. Now, the scorpionic solution here, with all this intense energy between the T-square and the yod to the Sun and Moon, is to stay centered in the now and tap into our inner power. Our inner power. Okay, moving on to Sunday. Now on Sunday, November 15th, Mercury-Chiron Quincunx goes exact at 5 degrees. So let's pull that up. Well, it's kind of tricky. Here we go. Sometimes it doesn't like me to mess around with it. So on Sunday, November 15th, Mercury and Chiron, Quincunx, is going exact at roughly 5 degrees. Now, we're harkened back to the energy of mid-October when Mercury-Chiron Quincunx went exact at that time. So we are reminded that healing is a process that takes time. We are reminded that healing requires an integration of unconscious processes, and that's the Mercury in Scorpio here, and that means delaying gratification to do the proper healing, and that's the Chiron in Aries. And this is challenging to delay gratification, the Chiron in Aries. This Mercury-Chiron Quincunx is part of a yod to Chiron, with Vesta in Virgo, also in Quincunx to Chiron in Aries. And with this yod to Chiron, we're reminded that as we heal, we have greater potential to heal the collective. As we do our inner work of psychological integration, we procure our inner spark of life, which can be used in service to others. And that is very much Vesta in Virgo. Vesta is the spark of life, like Atma Vitu. All right. Future highlights for the upcoming November weekly forecast. We have on this November 17th, we have Mercury-Uranus opposition going exact. On the 18th, we have the Sun-Saturn Sun-Saturn sextile going exact. November 19th, we have Venus-Saturn square going exact. On the 21st, we have Venus entering Scorpio, the Sun entering into Sagittarius, and the Sun-Moon waxing square in Pisces and Sagittarius. On November 22nd, Mercury-Mars Quincunx goes exact. So I really appreciate you joining me for another Trident Astrology Weekly Forecast. I look forward to you joining me next week. Weekly forecast will be posted on weekends for the week ahead. I want to send you so much blessings and love.